a large subject, and this very large subject tends to have a lot of details. However, without going into all of the specifics, I shall take you over the next 1 hour through what design thinking involves so that you have an idea, something for you to walk away with and possibly try and build upon further later. So this is just a little to whet your appetite. Let's begin with what. Give me just a moment and I will share my screen. Can you confirm that my screen is visible? Great, excellent. So I'm not taking you through a presentation here for the simple reason that design thinking functions in a manner and it functions best when we remove a lot of thought around the look and feel. That sounds strange, doesn't it? When we start by saying design, but in fact, this is actually design thinking. The point of design thinking is to stay rough. And yes, I know what the title is. The title of the session is Learn Design Thinking Process. But I'll begin by saying that design thinking is not actually a process, which means it's not linear where you do a step 1, step 2, step 3 in a straight line. You can jump back and forth. At times, you may end up doing something before another point altogether. We have to think of it as not a process at all and not an individual activity. The greatest joy, and we'll discover that in just a little bit, of design thinking is when you're working as a group. When you work as a group, you tend to share knowledge. You tend to share a lot more. We'll come to that bit in just a bit. Let me jump into what kind of problems we have. Where do you use design thinking? I'm sure a lot of you have knowledge already in problem solving of different types. You've all been problem solving in some manner or the other in your lives, all your lives, right from when a child starts first observing people and seeing where they are looking. So if I look at an apple and the baby is looking at me and I say, apple, the baby looks at the apple, looks at the sound coming out of my mouth and says, okay, so I'm supposed to understand that that is an apple and therefore starts calling that an apple. This is very advanced problem solving. We've done a lot more than that since we've all, I'm assuming we are all not babies here. And as people who have been solving problems, why should we be learning design thinking? What exactly is this about? Because yes, design thinking is a problem solving approach. As a problem solving approach, we learn this because there are 3 different kinds of problems. I'm going to name them for you very simply. They are simple, they are complex, or they are wicked. Okay, so let's put that there, simple, complex, and wicked. What is the meaning of a simple, and how do you understand something that is a simple problem? The simplest way of defining this is to look at cause and effect. I knock a glass full of water, the glass spills, glass falls, and water spills. So there is a cause and there's an effect. Did the water spill because of my hand? Yes, we don't want to get philosophical here. In actual fact, the water spilled because the glass fell. If my hand had touched the glass, but the glass had not fallen, the water would not have spilled. So understanding this concept of cause and effect, I do something and something else happens, that there's a cause and there's an effect. In a simple problem, the cause and effect is known. A lot of the problems that we solve involve known causes, known effects. Now we come to complex. Complex is a wilder animal. In complex, you have some causes that are known, some causes that are hidden. We don't know. Let's say I did not touch the glass, but the glass fell and the water was spilled. Now, probably the cause is hidden because it was in my hand. So what caused it? Maybe it was a wind and the glass was a paper cup or something of that sort. Maybe it was somebody else's hand. So there may be things that we know that we don't know. That's one point of complex. The other problem with complex problems is you can have so many different problems, causes in this problem. We don't know what is causing the issue, and it takes a little bit of time to figure it out. Complex problems are perfect for design thinking, because in design thinking, we can look at complex problems and solve them. But complex problems can also be solved without design thinking. There are other problem-solving techniques available which can help us reach a solution for complex problems. This brings us to wicked problems. So what exactly are wicked problems? It sounds great as a name. It sounds cool, wicked problem. Well, a wicked problem is something that we see a lot in medicine all the time. Doctors deal with wicked problems. Let's say I have a problem. I'm ill. I go to the doctor. The doctor says, you have this and the other disease. Therefore, I'm going to give you a medicine. So I take the medicine. I go back after a few days and I say, my ear is bleeding. He says, is that so? Let me see whether it is the medicine by any chance that I prescribed to you. But it could also be something else. Maybe you've got an infection. Or maybe the problem that you have was misdiagnosed and I gave you something completely inappropriate. Now, in a wicked problem, it's possible that whatever the doctor gives me at that point could actually make me worse. In a wicked problem, trying to really define the problem is so complex. It's so very difficult for anyone that we don't even know what is a cause, what is the effect. Is the symptom itself a cause? A lot of problems can get wicked in society. Let's take an example of a typical wicked problem. In the recent news, international news, there was talk of a bank called the Silicon Valley Bank, which in California just shut down. They went bankrupt nearly. What happened? What caused it? We know some of the actions, but we don't really know what caused what to actually push to the edge this bank. How do you avoid these kind of things in the future? Addressing these kind of problems, these are what are truly wicked problems. And this is what design thinking is meant for, because there are no other tools out there which will help you solve a wicked problem. There's another thing with wicked problems. They keep changing, they keep evolving. You cannot actually solve them. You can try and keep addressing some part of the problem as you move along. This is what is something that we address under design thinking. How do we do this? Where do we do this? That's what we shall see now. We spoke of cause and effect. I would like to add to this a feedback loop. When I go back to the doctor and inform the doctor that I have these additional symptoms, if I miss giving all the symptoms, then my feedback loop itself has a problem in it, which makes it more difficult for the doctor to identify the problem. If I go back and I explain all of my symptoms, then that feedback loop could actually help identify or make things a lot more complex. So there are both sides of the coin. Now, this is how we know whether a problem should be simple, complex, or wicked. I am obviously trying to simplify this here, and that's why there are only these 5 questions. There's a lot more to this entire subject, but let me put this down just as these 5 questions. Can we define the problem? Do we know what has gone wrong? Do we know at all what were the causes, at least some causes or effects? If we can define the problem quickly, easily with cause and effect, it's simple. If it is much harder to pin down the problem, it is complex. If it is nearly impossible to define the problem itself because of all of the moving parts, then we will say it is wicked. Now, do we know how to confirm that the problem is solved? Well, it's one thing to say, I had pain and now the pain is gone. Okay, so the problem is solved. But what if I had pain, now the pain is gone because whatever I took, something that I took, caused only the pain to go away. But inside my body, something is still going wrong. So how much time is required to understand that the problem is solved? When do you see that the problem has gone away? These kind of issues are essential when you're looking at problem solving, problem identification. Now, number 3. Number 3, you can see on my screen, is there an ideal solution? Now, this is a funny part. Is there an ideal solution, meaning that this is the best solution? When you have no way of identifying if something is the best solution because of the variety of options you have to try and solve the problem, and nothing really entirely solves the problem, you know you're dealing with a wicked problem. Remember, all of these points are just to help us identify, before we jump into trying to solve the problem, what kind of a problem we are dealing with. So there's a very famous quotation which says that if I am given 1 hour to cut down a tree, I will spend 50 minutes sharpening my axe and 10 minutes to cut down the tree. It is the same with us. When we are trying to solve a problem, we have to first attempt to identify, to define the real problem. After that, it is faster to get to a solution. And that's why, like in everything else, all other problem solving, the largest part of our activity is spent knowing whether this is the problem to solve, which is the problem that has to be actually solved. Do I have to cut off the hand that knocked off the glass? Do I have to tie it down? You see, I'm already jumping into solutions without understanding that the actual problem is that the glass fell. And that's why we have to be clear on how to define the problem. Now, when you have no ideal solution, no definition, clear definition for the problem, you do not know easily how to confirm that the problem is solved. We also check, is there past knowledge that will help us define the problem? In the past, somebody else had the same issue. For example, country A went bankrupt in this year? What can we learn from that? If we avoid doing what country A did, and we find ourselves in a similar situation, can we avoid the outcome of bankruptcy? Actually, maybe not. In all likelihood, the situation is never really the same. So even if we think that we are in a similar situation, we are not really in a similar situation. I mean, come on. I used to have a boss who had a salary at that time, and I'm talking nearly 20 years ago. Hello? Am I still audible? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I had this boss nearly 20 years ago who used to talk about what kind of a salary he got. I mean, his salary was maybe 20 times higher than mine, but he was not happy. He complained that he wasn't earning enough money. And I used to initially think, God, doesn't he know what he's paying me? I have bigger problems. But in reality, even though we seem to be in different situations, we are in a similar situation. The money that we are earning and the expenses that we have are not actually enough. Well, we have too many expenses and not enough earning. But the actual situation is really very different. For each one of us, we can give a simple statement and say, we are all in the same boat. But no, when you're looking at the detail of the problem, you are going to discover that there are so many more differences. So will past knowledge help us define the problem? Maybe, maybe not. Will past solutions help us solve this problem? So if we have a difficult problem answering all of these questions, we know for sure that design thinking is the way to go. All right, we have spent much of our time so far just talking about problem, problem type, problem identification, cause and effect, everything to do with problems. Let's now move to the next part. Why should we solve the problem as a group, not as individuals? Solving a problem as an individual requires us to apply, like in all other problem solving situations, our knowledge, our experience, whatever we have lived as an experience, to the current context. Now, with a wicked problem like we saw, or even a complex one, there are so many things to consider. What if our knowledge is not enough? What if the way we see things is not enough? I'm not sure how many of you have heard of the 4-eye check. When you do something, well, it is assumed that everybody has 2 eyes. So when I'm doing something, I'm applying my 2 eyes to it. A 4-eye check means I bring somebody else to look at this problem, whatever I have done, accomplished, achieved, and ask them to look at it as well. So 2 more eyes come and look at the same thing. And maybe they tell me, you can change this. This seems to be perfectly all right. This is lovely. This is wonderful. I see a small error here. I don't think this will work because I think you have completely missed the point. These are all the statements that I could get from a 4-eye check. This is what happens when we are dealing with complex and wicked problems. We need more minds. As a group, when we work on a problem, we are effectively going, I have not yet moved. The screen is not frozen, just to let you know. I am taking it slow because we have a certain number of points here to cover. So please don't worry if you think the screen is frozen. This is moving slowly. Now, when we work as a group, we are now looking at knowledge, lived experience, and perspective of not one person, but multiple people. Can you imagine what would happen if you were to bring together different minds to look at one problem? This is precisely what happened when we set up the country's constitution. There were different minds from different backgrounds because you needed people who understood agriculture, who understood industry, who understood economics, finance, taxes, laws, driving on the road, so many different aspects, all to be covered under a constitution. The same constitution also covers rights of people. All of these concepts, all of these problems to be solved were only possible because you had a group trying to solve a problem. Let me take a complex example. How do you build trust? How does an organization build trust between the employees and leadership? That is typically a moving target. It is a complex problem. It involves so many different causes and effects. You're never quite sure what, where could go wrong, could make the problem actually worse when you're trying to implement a solution. So whether it is complex or wicked, these kind of problems need more people to come together. They need more people to think, to talk, to discuss. So if you're looking at the concept of solving a problem, because of the complexity level of complex and wicked problems, it is best to work as a group. What happens when you work as a group? There are some upsides and there are some downsides. Let's talk about the downsides first. Okay, this is where I'm sure I'm saying something which all of you thoroughly understand and appreciate. How many of you have gone and tried to take any decision at home which involves a whole family? Yes, complete chaos. Everybody has an opinion. That is a problem, that big downside when you're dealing with a group rather than individuals. Imagine if one person could say, I am going to decide about the entire vacation and everyone should love it. Or if we were to say, I will decide which sweets should be purchased for this wedding. Okay, already the conversations have started. 40 people have offered an opinion, and all of those opinions could be contradictory. They could all not match each other. In this kind of a perspective, how do you deal with a group to solve a problem if everybody has an opinion? Working as a group requires us to follow certain basic rules. These basic rules for working as a group really involve not judging whatever is being said. You put down the list of every single idea without bias, without judgment. You list it all out. You see, when we are talking, when we are discussing with each other, typically we tend to react a lot more to what the other person is saying than think about what they are saying. And therefore, if you react, you are likely to shut down ideas very early. No, I don't think that's going to work. Or, oh, what you're saying is right, but so how many of us have been killed by that but followed by dot, dot, dot? So a lot of ideas are blocked because people react to them. So we have to find, and there are tools available to ensure that all thoughts, all ideas, whether it is in problem definition or in trying to find a solution, all thoughts are captured. Once they are captured, then you can debate on them, understand which ones make sense, which ones don't make sense. Sometimes the weirdest of things may be our final solution. So anything that involves groups has to be thought of as an approach to working together. How do we work together implies various tools to ensure that nobody is left unheard. Okay, now perspectives, lived experience, knowledge, everyone comes with their own. Whether you have worked in a corporate environment, you have worked or never worked in your life, you have just started out, you have studied something, you have not studied anything, it doesn't matter. We all have knowledge, we all have lived experiences, and therefore we all have different perspectives. And that's how working as a group helps solve problems. Now, who are we really solving the problem for? That's a question that we rarely ask. We typically tend to say, what is the problem? And then we say, I will solve it. We very rarely ask this question, who are we solving the problem for? Ultimately, there is one golden triangle. There's a golden triangle that we look at in design thinking. Well, any problem solving for that matter, but design thinking has this third point, which is stronger. There is viability. Is it technically possible at all? Is it viable? Is it feasible? Do we have the money for it? The money that we have, is it enough to solve this problem? So you look at feasibility, viability, which looks at both the commercial constraints and technical limitations. But finally, most importantly, what is the desirability? What does the user, the human, need? If I tell you that it's easy to make footwear around the world, we wear footwear, but are all footwear the same? Do all shoes look the same? Do we wear the same kind of footwear for all kinds of situations? If I were to wear tap dancing shoes and go rock climbing, I will probably end up in hospital. If I try and say that I am going to dress up in a three-piece suit and walk out on the streets of Delhi in summer for a long walk, then I will also land up in a hospital, but probably a different type. Applying thought to who we are trying to solve the problem for requires us to build one critical aspect called empathy. Empathy is a very, very easy thing to do once you know how, but if you don't know, then you get lost in sympathy, because sympathy means feeling sorry for someone. Empathy means putting ourselves in their shoes. If I were this person, would I like this? Would I not like this? Would this be easy for me to use? Would it be confusing for me? If I were this person and someone were to give me this tool, would I use it? So everything that we do we generally tend to look at it from our perspective. Empathy is looking at it from another person's perspective. Now, there are several books that have been written on each one of these. So forgive me if I'm being very, very generic and shortening this down significantly. Typically, empathy means looking at the user. Who is going to be the user of the problem that we are trying to solve? If we are talking as a society, as a community, are we looking at the richest person in the room? Are we looking at the poorest person in the room? Are we looking at the strongest person, the weakest person? These are what are called extreme users. If we talk to these extreme users, then we get a certain understanding of what their problems are. Then, of course, we do talk to people who are regular users and understand their perspective. Let me take a simple example of a staircase in a building, an office building which has stairs. There's no lift. Therefore, it's very difficult if it is a multi-storied building for someone who is weak at that moment, who is old. So a bunch of different people, many of our users will find it difficult to use that building. A lift would simplify things for them. Great. We put in stairs, we've got lifts, our problem is solved. But there are some extreme users here. We have people who use wheelchairs. They can't use stairs. They can't get to the lift. What do? How do they go up? So they need a different kind of a solution. I'm giving you some very simple, basic examples, but do understand that problem statements can be a lot more complex than this. But this is just for you to understand that every single time we look at a problem, we have to look at the problem from the user's perspective. Which brings us to the next point. Who is a user? Do we understand the users? Do we understand who all are the users? I see here that there are 300 plus people on this call. And on this webinar, of the 300 people that I have, all of you are my users. Do I understand who you are? Is it possible for me to get a complete list? Well, I can possibly look at the names, but can I understand you beyond your name? Each one of you, what it is you do, what you need, why you are here. And if I cannot do that, how can I create this webinar where I hope that all of you will take something away? For this, I have to work with a concept. I have to work with some tools. And these tools are focused. These are tools such as personas. I can say, I would like to understand my user as a potential person. So I have a person who is possibly looking to learn and solve problems as a group. I have a person who's possibly heard about design thinking and knows nothing about it and is attending this webinar to get a quick overview because they have an hour to spare. I have possibly people who want to know, should I put in more time to learn this? And so they are attending this webinar just to get that overview to take a next decision. So the purposes can be many. What I have to do is put myself in your shoes, attempt to create some personas, some generic purposes, some generic desires that you may have, And from that, address and create whatever I need as a solution. So I have to assume the mindset of my user. Similarly, when you're solving a problem as a thinking expert, as a design thinker, you will have to think of, for that problem, for that context, who are the different kinds of users? Generic. I can also speak to some. If I get access, for example, before this webinar, if I get access to a few people who have signed up, I could reach out and ask, why are you attending this webinar? Could you let me know what your purpose is? Also, what will help you? Should I show you something? Should I explain it to you? Should I make something with you? Now, the reason I may still decide to do what I'm doing right now is because of paucity of time, because I don't have anything more than an hour. But I will still conduct that interview to understand, because that can help me. Then it is also, like I explained, engaging with extreme users. We also have the possibility of mapping a journey. When you're talking about a solution, you map the journey of the user through the solution. For example, let's say that I run a restaurant. I want to map the journey of my user. I have different ways of doing it. I can say the person books an appointment or books a table at the restaurant, comes in, and I say, oh, you have made a reservation. Please come in. If a person has not made a reservation, then I tell them, oh, you don't have a reservation? Let me see if I can really help you. I'm not so sure. So that is a choice I make. Or I could just say, do you have a reservation? No? Please come in. We do have tables. Yes? Excellent. Can I have your name? Done. These are two different journeys for a restaurant. This is just one simple aspect, a small part. I could allow you to place an order online, make the payment even before you walk into the restaurant. And so maybe give you an option to say, come in. As after you come in, you want 2 items to be brought to the table. After 15 minutes, you want the next set of items to be brought to the table. So I could give you all of those options to choose on an app, or I could keep it completely open and say, I will get you to a table, and then you can decide what you want. This is mapping a journey of a user. If you map the journey for a user, your solution itself will change, because the needs of your user will define the problem, and that will define the solution. Everything depends on how you empathize, what kind of tools you use, and what kind of input you get from your users. But without this empathy, which means putting ourselves in place of the user or talking and engaging with the user, it's difficult for us to get a good solution, which is why you can have sometimes, well, a perfect example is government websites. Anybody here who loves using a government website? If you don't, it has much to do with the fact that they are not really talking to users. So they don't understand what the user wants. Somebody takes a decision. I think the user will do this and then do this, then do that. I will make this system. So in my system, the user will come in, log in, and they will book something somewhere, and I will take them through these screens. The initial days of Paytm and Paytm today, I saw a recent LinkedIn post which said, what do you think of everything everywhere all at once? Is it a movie or is it Paytm's UX strategy? You get onto Paytm and you have everything in more than one place. This is what is called mapping a journey. If you have not mapped the journey, then you can have a lot of confusion for the user. Now, conducting the 5 why is an approach where you actually approach the problem with a step why option. If you have heard of ChatGPT in the news recently, ChatGPT allows you to ask first 5, and now recently they have increased the number to 15. But generally, if you think hard and ask the right questions, the 5 why, you first ask one why, then you ask a deeper understanding why, and so on and so forth. Generally, in 5 whys, you come to the actual cause or you come to the actual need of the person. Now, you have conduct what, how, why, and I'm skipping this because it's exactly what it looks like. What is the problem, or how do you deal with this today, and why do you do what you do? And then there is developing metaphors and analogies. Design thinking is fabulous when you apply something to say that, what if I consider this entire problem as a game? Or what if I consider this problem to be a city which has streets, which has parks, which has buildings, and every single whatever I have, I draw parallel to my metaphor, to my analogy. If I consider that my business process or my data analysis is like making, is like using paneer. It's like cooking. I make an analogy of the kitchen. I start out by saying that I have milk, which is the base that every single one needs to use. Starting with this milk, everyone may decide to go ahead and first make paneer out of that milk. So everyone does the same step, everyone does exactly the same thing, and they get paneer. However, from there, things change. One person takes that paneer and makes paneer paratha out of it. Another person makes rasgulla out of it. A third person goes and says, I want to make paneer makhni. Data can be just like that, or your business process can be just like that. Everyone does one step, which is the same, and then there is a branching off. From that second step or third step, wherever the paneer happened, there is a branching off into 3 or more. There can be multiple branches. And from there, you could have additional branches. Maybe somebody is taking this approach of an analogy just to help all the others in the group understand the problem better. Or maybe everyone is looking at this to expand their mind, to change the way they think. If they are able to arrive at making the right analogies, then maybe whatever solutions exist in that other domain, like city, could be applied here in a smaller way. I read a very interesting article last week about how there is a completely new fabric, a new material that is being made, a waterproof material based on biomimicry. Biomimicry is where you see nature, you observe nature, and based on your observation of nature, you try and recreate whatever nature is doing by applying that solution to your problem. Empathy, a lot of empathy, and I'm stepping back a bit to empathy because empathy will revolve, everything will revolve around human beings, around the user. Empathy also involves a lot of observation. I'll tell you more on this in just a bit. Just a quick point here. The steps that are there. Again, I will repeat that design thinking is not thought of as a process because these steps that you see here, empathize is there with you all the way. Define, you may ideate, you may prototype, you may test, you may go back to define, you may go back to ideate. So you can jump between steps. So it is not a linear process. Step one is done. Now I move to step two. Step two is done. I never come back to step two or step one. Okay. So if you have to think of a process, please think that whatever you do, everything that you are applying here follows these steps. Now, I have given you 5 steps. You will also find some people calling out 4 steps, somebody expanding this to 6 steps. So far, I've never seen a 7 step, but you never know. It doesn't matter how this is broken down or expanded further or contracted. Remember that you have at least these steps. You empathize, you define, you ideate, you prototype, and you test. Always remember your constraints: viability, feasibility, desirability. Viability are money constraints. Feasibility is whether it is technically possible or not. Desirability comes to human needs, and it's very important to note this point, whether they are expressed or unexpressed. This is the point where design thinkers have to understand what the person is saying as opposed to what they actually need. Sometimes I can say something, but I can do something else altogether. For example, I can say that I need laces. Whenever I buy shoes, I need laces. But in actual fact, I never have the time to tie laces. So what I end up doing is I pull them a little taut and then I run because I don't have the time. What does this mean for me as a design thinker? The person is telling me that they want laces, but I'm observing that they need footwear that holds their foot tight. They may not actually require those laces. So if I give them something else that will allow them to hold their foot tight, that might solve the problem. Of course, I will go ahead and ask them. I will give them maybe something to test. I will show them a prototype. But this is what it is about. Now, under ideate, I'm going to only talk of 2 tools. There are multiple tools, both for problem solving and ideation. Problem solving and ideation share a lot of tools between them. I'm only talking of 2 here because these are, one of them you may be already familiar with, which is brainstorming. In brainstorming, you all put your ideas together, however wild they may be. You write down all the ideas and then you decide, so how do we solve this problem? How do we define this problem? That is brainstorming. Now, what is reverse brainstorming, you're wondering? So how exactly do you do reverse brainstorming? So I will take a very old example from Sanskrit. A very, very ancient example in Sanskrit. A story goes that man was asked to define God.
So some people said, God is this, God is that. This is what is God. And another approach, which was unlike this brainstorming, went with a reverse brainstorming. God is not this, God is not that. This is in Sanskrit, it is known as neti neti. Not this, not this. God is not this, God is not this. Imagine if you could look at your problem from both perspectives, what it is and what it is not. Now, I will extend this a little bit from a solutioning perspective, from an ideation perspective. I want to do a reverse brainstorming for a solution. There is a solution which I still haven't defined. So I'm talking, let's say, of a website, a box, a locker, something strong, something that should not allow people to enter anything. And I say, let's reverse brainstorm. The reverse brainstorming will say, the question to everyone would be, how can you enter this? Which means, how can you break the solution? Brainstorming is about trying to find something from the, yes, this is what it is. The reverse approach, reverse brainstorming is trying to break something. If you get all of those ideas on how to break that something down, that itself helps you identify, oh, okay, so I should not allow this, I should not allow that, I should not allow any of these items. So both brainstorming and reverse brainstorming are essential for us, but you have to maintain context. Everything is about context. And what is our context? Our context is the kind of problem, how we have identified it, what were all the questions, what we found from our exercise in empathy with the users, which are all our constraints. All of this goes into context. So as design thinkers, we maintain context and look at brainstorming and reverse brainstorming. Now, let's say I have an idea after 3 days or 2 days or 4 days, whatever as a group I have worked, I have come up with some kind of solution option. How do I know, should I build a solution? I don't have the budget for it. How do I know if this will work or not work? Depending on the amount of time you have, depending upon the complexity, depending on all of these different factors, which is our context, you can do feasibility, where you just try and understand whether it will fit our budget. Then you could do a low fidelity or a high fidelity or a live data approach. This is where you create what all of these are prototypes. What is a low fidelity prototype? One of the simplest low fidelity prototype is a sketch. You make a sketch, you draw a diagram. You make another sketch, another diagram. You show somebody, does this sketch, does this idea work for you? If you've seen all of those fancy movies where say the hero outlines 2 buildings and says to jump from this building A to this building B, this is where I will build a pendulum and swing from here to there. People look at it and say, it's possible, it's not possible. And ultimately the person does it. This is where you are applying the prototype and test methodology. So you're prototyping by first building something to show the user. Low fidelity requires you to have something very basic, drawings. If I have to do a high fidelity, I will probably create those two buildings in out of paper, cardboard, whatever I want, of the same height as a drawing. Tie some twine, some little twine to one end and say, now on the other end, I'm tying this doll and I'm going to swing the doll from here to there. And you can see it reaches. Therefore, the problem is solved if this works. How do we know if it works? We have created a prototype, either low fidelity or a high fidelity. Now there is one more way, which is live data. I go to those two buildings, I tie the rope, I put a dummy, a big man-sized dummy, and I swing the dummy from building A to building B. Depending on how much money you have, time you have, or the other constraints that are available, we create prototypes. Just to understand the different kinds of prototypes, again, your prototyping tools are sketching, storyboarding. A storyboard tells you this person comes in. We've all seen comics. In the newspapers, you get these comic strips. Two people are talking. One person is doing something. The next frame shows somebody else doing something. This is a storyboard. You could also use role play. A role play, you talk to each other. One person pretends to be the user, another person pretends to be the service provider, and you have a conversation. And that way you prototype for the user. The last one, of course, the fourth one is physical. Like I said, you can make out of cardboard, out of paper, or anything that you have handy. You can make those two buildings, tie the twine, and swing a toy from point A to point B. So all of these pieces that I have shown you will only work. All of these prototypes need to be tested. What is essential is for us to go to the users, those same users with whom we have empathized, with whom we have engaged. Go back to those users, tell them, look, I have this. Does this work for you? They may say yes, no, yes, but. Note down every bit of information. We go back to that feedback loop. If they give you feedback, you take that feedback, you incorporate it into your prototype. Maybe they say, can you make the length? Can you increase the length of the rope? Can you do something else? So whatever feedback you get, you incorporate into the prototype. And that's how you have something which is real, practicable, that you can actually develop as a product, as a solution. So these are the different ways, this is the approach to be taken for design thinking. I know that it's short. I know that it was really something that just 1 hour. I hope that you have received some kind of an input on whether you want to learn this further, whether you would like to apply this, or even if it is something that was of mild interest to you. But I hope that you all took away something from this 1 hour. I see a question. Yes, role plays can be used for IT systems. You can pretend to have one system talking to a human, another system talking to another system or human. All of these are possible. I'm sorry, I don't have a PPT on this because this is completely non-linear. Typically, I have discovered over the years in conducting workshops that workshops are a much stronger way of learning design thinking than trainings. Of course, trainings do have their own purposes. If I could do all of this in a room with you all, that would be delightful. Or 4 or 5 days. If any of you are interested in this, please reach out to Skill Upright. Feel free and we can have a longer conversation. As a subject, design thinking has been covered by several books written by various experts. There are videos aplenty on YouTube. Of course, there are paid courses on Udemy. There are paid courses. There's free content available, or you have paid content on LinkedIn. There are a lot of ways of getting canned information. And of course, you have workshops where you have in-person experiences of design thinking. Please reach out to Skill Upright. Perhaps I can request someone from Skill Upright to reach out to you.